Welcome, everyone, to the Instrument Closet Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Philippi, your local mass communications major, asking the students, staff, and alumni of the East Central University Band Program about their life and time in the world of music. Today, the podcast is featuring Dr. Nathaniel Berman, the Associate Professor of the Performing Arts at East Central University. Dr. Berman, originally from Las Cruces, New Mexico, is Associate Professor of Performing Arts at East Central University, where he teaches applied woodwinds, leads chamber ensembles, and the jazz band ensemble, and has taught the music history sequence, class woodwinds, and forms and analysis. He has previously taught as a graduate assistant and adjunct instructor at both the University of Northern Colorado and at New York University. He is an active performer, most notably with woodwind duo Madeira Winds, including highlight performances in Spain, France, South America, Canada, and across the United States. Having spent a decades-long career mastering 3 instruments, Dr. Berman brings a unique facility and perspective to students, audiences, and fellow musicians, striving to highlight not only the difference between the woodwinds, but also their similarities, distinct colors, and personalities within works both traditional and from today's most dynamic living composers. He holds a Doctorate of Arts in Music from the University of Northern Colorado, a Master of Arts in Music from New York University, and a Bachelor's of Music in Performance from Michigan State University. Dr. Berman is a Dalk Mouthpieces artist and a member of professional organizations including the North American Saxophone Alliance, the National Flute Association, the International Clarinet Association, the National Association of College Wind and Percussion Instructors, and the College Music Society. Hello to the show, Dr. Berman. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. You got to start off with the age-old question. Why did you pick music as your career?
Well, initially, I don't think it was so much of a choice as just what I started to do. I've always been the kind of person that when I was in school, I did my homework. I did whatever I was asked to do, for better or worse. And so when I joined band, the band director said, practicing your instrument is your homework. So I said, okay. And they said, you have to do it every day. So I did that every day. And it just kind of proceeded from there. I did well at band as I continued to practice, and I continued to do well and succeed at things. And then I realized that I was pretty good at it, and I just kept on going. And I don't think I ever stopped. And that's just kind of how I fell into music being my career.
Wow, that is really interesting. I think you've had the most interesting response for why you picked music so far, at least for this season. So which genre, because I know you conduct quite a few genres of music, which one has been your favorite to conduct so far?
Well, I've led, like you said, I've done a number of different things. I've led jazz bands. I've led small, very small, medium, and even some large chamber ensembles, that sort of thing. Actually, my favorite thing to do is to get groups to the point where they don't need a conductor. So I do enjoy leading groups, but I enjoy even more teaching students how to do things so that they can actually function without a conductor. I think I enjoy more the coaching process than the conducting process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Coaching process is interesting because I know there have been some people, some professors that prefer having a very hands-on approach and then a very hands-off approach. So when it comes to the creation of small ensembles or even large chamber ensembles, what's your process of going through with that?
Well, since I'm leading these groups in an educational institution, first and foremost is I want people to learn something. That's more important to me than putting on a good concert or than playing music that I like or that the students like. All of that is important, but the most important thing is that students come out learning something, knowing more, having more ability to do something than they did beforehand. So my process first stems from that. I often go into it not knowing exactly what we'll be doing on a concert, but that's not, like I said, what's at the forefront of my concern is what we'll do at the concert. I like to approach things as what do these students need to learn, which direction seems like it's interesting to the students, that they're gaining, which directions do they need to gain more skills or experience at, and then whatever seems to come together is what we end up doing as far as a concert. So I guess my overall goal is to help students gain the skills to be able to do whatever it is that they need to do at the time. So, for example, in small chamber ensembles, I usually will pick pieces because that's sometimes difficult to do. Sometimes students come with a specific piece or sort of piece they want to do, but especially if it's a strange instrumentation, a clarinet, trumpet, bassoon trio or something. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes they need help trying to find music that exists. But then my goal beyond that is to give them the skills to play together as a chamber ensemble. It's not my job to practice their parts for them and everything, and so I kind of expect them to do that side of things. What I feel that my role as a coach is to help them with the stuff that's maybe not as obvious of how to do. Now, when it comes to jazz band, which I've done a fair amount of, there are so many different aspects of jazz, and I like all of them. Sometimes the jazz band, as you know, has been a full big band. Sometimes it's been a small ensemble. Sometimes it's been a saxophone quartet or a combo or any number of different things. And so I try to explore all the different facets of jazz, whatever it seems most conducive to the group. Sometimes we've explored songwriting. Sometimes it's been more of an improvisation class. Sometimes we've worked on small group combo type playing. Sometimes it's been big band section playing. And I think it's all important. It's all valuable. And so I kind of like the group to take me in the direction that it needs to go.
So you do private lessons here, and I would anticipate that you've had students with various kinds of personalities, from being like super shy to being very overconfident. So how do you accommodate for those students to either like dial it back or like bring more of their talent forward?
Well, I think there's been a lot discussed, and it's important for me as a teacher to figure out what works best for the student. But I think equally important is there are different teaching styles, and what might work best for another teacher or professor teaching a student might not be what I'm the best at, or might not work the best for me. So I think it's kind of a combination of figuring out how my teaching style interacts with that student's learning style. And it is a learning process, I think, for both of us. That's one thing I really like about teaching private lessons. It's so dynamic. It's so in my 9th grade year, I participated in a group called the Blue Lake International Band. And this was part of the Blue Lake summer music camp up in Michigan. And we formed a wind ensemble, a band. We went on a little tour. We toured, we went to Germany, the Netherlands, and France, and we played a bunch of little concerts. So that was fantastic. I was one of the, I don't think I was the youngest person in the group, but I was 13 at the time. And I think there were 3 or 4 of us in the band that were 13, and the rest were, various ages between then and 18 or 19 years old. So I was one of the younger people in the group, so I was a little bit more shy and a little bit less participatory in a lot of the kind of social and sightseeing events that we did. But it was exciting. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I would not have gone to see all these different little towns in Germany. I would have not have gone to France or the Netherlands. I think we stopped in Belgium too. So I wouldn't have seen all those places. So that was exciting. I would say the first time I traveled internationally to perform professionally, sort of when I was a doctoral student at the University of Northern Colorado. I was a member of the wind ensemble, and our wind ensemble went and toured in China. One of the professors, a piano professor from Northern Colorado, had some concerts lined up in China, and he wanted to play piano concertos, and so he took the wind ensemble with him. He got some sort of funding to do that. So that was interesting and fun. The first time outside of school, I think that it was actually, this must have been 2014. So this was right after I started here, or right before I started here, actually. My chamber ensemble, chamber duo Medetta Winds, with another professor here, Dr. Alexandra Aguirre, we went on tour to Peru and France. There was a international flute festival in Peru that we went to, and that was fantastic. We met with flutists from all over the world. It's a major international flute thing in Lima, Peru every year. We played as part of a flute trio with another flutist, Dr. Brielle Frost, who teaches at Lamar University now. And so that was fantastic, hearing flutists from around the world. Certainly a place that I probably wouldn't have, and still probably wouldn't have gone to Peru for any reason, but it was interesting. It was wonderful. And similarly, went to Strasbourg, France for the World Saxophone Congress. I've been to one other World Saxophone Congress since, just this last year. There was a World Saxophone Congress in Spain on Gran Canaria Island, and that was also interesting. And, it's a great way to see places you wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah. So, what would be your advice for students when they first, like, if they've never gone outside the country before and, like, they're super nervous, super scared, don't know what to do? What would be your advice for those students?
Well, the first time going outside of the country, uh, important advice to keep in mind is people are people. The people you encounter, they may or may not speak the same language as you. They may have, some different culture, customs, but they're still people. They're not appreciably different than people anywhere. So they're not scary. They're no scarier than people are in general, I guess. So people are people. People are going to be, human beings, no matter where you go. Keep in mind that if there's a language barrier, it's important to try. It's not important to always be right, but it's important to try. Try saying a few words in, a different language if you can. You might totally mess it up, but people appreciate the effort, and people will usually try to make the effort back as well. And communication difficulties exist, but there's a lot more to communication than just knowing the language.
So you have taught at a variety of regions in the United States. What brought you here to East Central University in particular?
Well, I first came to ECU while I was still a doctoral student. I'd finished all my coursework at Northern Colorado, and honestly, I was a doctoral student getting a degree in music, and I wanted to apply to all the jobs I could, as one does. I mean, the job market in higher education is very tight, and what brought me here is that I got the job. So I will always be grateful that ECU is willing to give me a chance, because everyone has to have a first job. And I had taught adjunct, and I had taught some lessons as part of being a graduate assistant and stuff, but never a full-time. And so I'm very grateful that ECU is willing to give me the chance.
So what was it like when you took on the jazz band? What was it, a few years ago, was it, that you became the full-time conductor for jazz band? What was that like?
Okay, well, when I first started here in 2014, I was the jazz director when I first started. And so I directed the jazz band, and it had varied sometimes between being one full big band. At one point, there were enough students where we actually had two full big bands. I split it into two groups. Sometimes it had been a little bit smaller. And then my teaching load got to be large enough with woodwind students that I couldn't really handle all of that. I didn't have enough time. And so we brought in another instructor, Kirk Palmer, who taught jazz band for a while. And then when Mr. Palmer left, I took over the jazz band. So I had done it before, and I enjoy it. That was actually something that I had far less experience at than other things coming in here. I mean, I'd performed in jazz bands a ton, but I'd never actually led a jazz band before coming here. So I was really grateful to get that experience when I first started. And it's been interesting. I've really enjoyed all the different things that I could do with jazz band. I mean, whether it's leading traditional big band music or helping people with improvisation, or treating it like kind of like an improv class. We've even done a significant amount of work with free jazz and free improvisation, and I've found that to be really interesting and fun.
So with jazz band, especially with improvisation probably being one of the biggest things that scares students when they first enter or come into contact with it, what is your method for helping those students like calm down and think rationally when learning improvisation in jazz?
Well, one thing that I remember a previous director doing when I was a student that I hadn't really done until this year, maybe last year I did it, that it kind of helps calm people down, but almost by throwing them into the fire a little bit, is making everyone sing a scat solo, because nearly no one is comfortable with that unless you are experienced with doing that. And so by making everyone do that, which everyone is pretty uncomfortable with, myself included, I include myself with this, that helps a lot of people kind of get over the initial fear of, oh, I might sound bad. Yeah, you're going to sound bad. It's okay. You have to be willing to sound all sorts of different ways, good, bad, and otherwise, to really make progress and have success. So getting over this nervousness, some of that is allowing yourself the freedom to not sound perfect.
Yeah. I like that thought process of just, it's fine that you're not perfect the first time. You just just do it, and then over time you'll get better at it, because I mean that's the point of growing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be. And even if you, on a personal level, don't feel like you're making progress as fast as you want, or that you sound the way you want, at least you won't be so nervous doing it, and you won't have that aspect of it of sounding nervous and tentative, which honestly is a big part of what makes people not sound the way they want, is if they sound nervous or tentative or scared.
And speaking of jazz band, John DeVersa is coming back to ECU next week, isn't it? April 2nd?
Yeah, doing a concert next Tuesday.
So, and he came here back in the spring semester of 2022. So what was it like getting in contact with John DeVersa the first time and then again this year?
Well, we're doing very different things, and he's doing very different things. The first time he came, we did nearly all big band music. So he had a whole bunch of arrangements that won a Grammy Award for arranging, and a lot of them were from his album Junk Wagon. And so we did as a jazz band, we did a lot of rehearsing of those, and they were pretty intricate, complicated arrangements beforehand, and you were part of that.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time. This time he recently come out with an album called The Art of the Duo, which is just John DeVersa and pianist Tal Cohen, who's also going to be coming. And so it's obviously very different music. Instead of full big band arrangements, it's a lot of duo playing. And as a ECU jazz band, we're going to be doing different things as well. We are treating it a lot more improvisationally. We're not exactly sure what he's going to want, but we want to support him as much as possible. So I think that we're going to have members of the rhythm section. We're probably not going to have the whole jazz band accompanying John DeVersa throughout the whole first half, but we're going to be playing 3 songs, and various members of the group will probably take solos, maybe play along a little bit, maybe participate in the rhythm section, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit smaller, more intimate type music and scale performance.
Interesting. That's a very different dynamic from 2022's concert. I actually kind of like that. I'm very excited to see the concert next week.
Yeah, it should be fun. I as a professional musician, most of my playing is not jazz. Most of my playing is, though, in a duo context. And so I'm kind of excited to hear other stuff in the duo context. I think that duos are able to do things that some other groups, even if they're not much bigger, quartets, quintets, can't exactly do. It's a lot more intimate and conversational, and I find that kind of exciting.
Yeah. So, of your 3 main instruments that you play on, which one is your favorite and why?
Well, I don't know that I really have a favorite. I started saxophone first, but only first by a matter of 7 or 8 months or something. So I started clarinet and flute pretty soon after it. I feel comfortable on all of them. Sometimes I feel a little bit more drawn to one or the other for certain things. Lately, in playing jazz, I've actually been a lot more drawn to clarinet and soprano saxophone than other things for some reason. It's just I enjoy it. It feels natural for me. Not that I haven't played a lot of alto and tenor sax and various other things in jazz band. I've actually played a lot of Barry in big bands as well. But lately, soprano sax and clarinet have felt very comfortable for jazz. I really enjoy playing flute. Recently participated in a jazz flute big band this last summer, I guess that was. I don't know. I enjoy all of them, but I feel like whichever one I'm playing at the moment is the one I like the most. And so I guess that's kind of nice.
Just basically a roulette wheel of, all right, which one am I feeling this month?
Yeah.
So speaking of performing on those, you and Dr. Aguirre performed a duet during the staff concert last semester. So what was you guys' process in terms of like picking out the piece and then rehearsing it while you guys were still teaching classes?
Well, we have a pretty wide repertoire of pieces. A lot of them were written for some combination of instruments that we play, but a significant amount of them now we've actually commissioned composers to write for us. Either friends of ours or just composers we liked their music. So we have a lot of pieces that were written specifically for us in various instrumentations, flute and saxophone, piccolo and tenor sax, all sorts of different arrangements. I honestly can't remember which piece we played for that, but the process of rehearsing, we're fortunate that we have generally some time during the day, not a lot, but where we can practice together. Sometime in the evening we practice together. So we do as much of our practicing together as we can. And I think that helps us really be as together and kind of in tune with each other as possible.
So going back to private lessons, which method books would you recommend for any woodwind player, or if there's like a specific one for a specific instrument, which one would you suggest?
Well, there are a lot of them out there, and I think it kind of, to a certain extent, depends on the level and what your goals are. If you're kind of a beginning or near the beginning, I really like the Rubenk method books. I think they're a good, solid way to kind of get a beginning foundation on the instruments. There's multiple volumes of those at different levels. Once you get to a little bit higher level, kind of a collegiate level as well, then I think you can start getting into various different technique books, and there are a number of good ones on each instrument. I personally like, for saxophone, I really like the scale book Les Gammes by Jean-Marie Landex. It's kind of a standard, goes through all the scales in thirds and fourths and fifths and all that kind of stuff. It helps with the technique. On clarinet, I really like this. It's a classic, been around for almost 200 years now. Karl Berman's complete method for the clarinet. It's got, again, all sorts of scales and stuff. Flute has a number of different ones as well. The classic Taffanel Gobert scale book. I use all of those, and honestly, you can just as easily make up your own scale exercises. Once you kind of see the technique of how these scale books work, even if you don't have a scale book, you can essentially do the same thing by creating your own 5-note scales and arpeggios and everything. As long as you're consistent about it, I think it can work just fine.
So when it comes to students and their solo repertoire, what would you suggest for them to not be so nervous? Is it kind of a similar process to improv solos, or do you think that there's a bit of a different process for those solo students?
Well, the more you do it, the easier it will get. And I know that doesn't help the first few times you do it, because it just doesn't. But the more you do it, the easier it will get. Also, giving yourself kind of smaller audiences to work up to can be very helpful. So if you have friends or family or siblings or something that you can play for, that can help, as long as you're not terrified of your parents or something like that. But that can really help. I've even had some people who it's been very helpful to put up a poster with a lot of people on it on the opposite side of the room, so they can kind of psych themselves out into you're playing for a lot of people. Some people are able to psych themselves out into that a little bit more than others, but it can be very helpful. For a lot of people, it's not so much the nervousness itself that causes problems, but the symptoms of the nervousness, like faster heart rate, sweaty palms, shallow breathing, that kind of stuff. And so if that seems to really be a problem, you can kind of mimic that, not by making yourself nervous, but by making yourself out of breath. So you could try running a lap around a building and then playing your piece. You can try distracting yourself by trying to play in the dark where you can only barely see your music. I've had a lot of students try to distract them by have them stand on one leg on top of a chair while they're playing, so that they're kind of distracted, right? And so for a lot of people, that's what's anxiety inducing, or that's what anxiety does for them, is it distracts them. So if you can mimic this idea of distraction and get used to playing with distraction, it might not make you any less nervous, but you might give you the tools to deal with it.
Yeah. Those were some very interesting techniques. I've never thought about that.
You never thought of playing or singing standing on one leg?
No.
All right, well, give you something to try.
Oh, that would be very interesting for next year. Yeah, I'll have to give that a shot.
All right, do a whole recital on one leg.
Oh, that would be hysterical. So of course you teach regular classes at ECU. So what so far has been your favorite class to teach?
Well, I enjoy teaching all sorts of different things. And honestly, one thing that I have found that I really enjoy teaching, that initially I was actually surprised I enjoyed teaching it because I had no experience teaching it at all, was music history. I really enjoy teaching lessons and leading ensembles and all the other things I do too. But when I first started here, I didn't know until maybe it was a day or maybe 2 days before the first day of classes if I was going to be teaching music history or music theory in addition to lessons. And so I was told music history. So I started teaching music history, and I had never taught music history. Of course, I had taken music history classes as a student, but I didn't major in music history or musicology. I took whatever classes I needed to for being a performance major. So I was a little nervous going into that, but I have found since that I really enjoy teaching music history. I find it interesting. I like having a dialogue with the students about the historical topics going on and really how they relate to whatever's going on now. Music history intersects very much with political history and economic history and all sorts of other histories. And so I kind of enjoy not just the music history aspect of it, but kind of how music is influenced by and has influenced other historical trends as well.
Yeah, music history, I mean, it's super vast, goes way back to pretty much first man.
Yeah, to the beginning of time.
So for our final question for today, what advice would you give music students in general?
Well, let's see, college music students or aspiring college music students, or all of them. Well, I think that, different people make progress at different rates of speed. And so you need to put as much time and work into it as you need to put into it. And that might be a lot more and it might be a lot less than other people. And that doesn't mean that it's any better or worse. Everyone is different. And so you need to put into it what you need to put into it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. All right, well, that is all the time we've got for today. Thank you very much for appearing on the show, Dr. Berman.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Tune in next time for another interview of The Instrument Closet, where we will be featuring Kara Keith, principal trumpet of the East Central University Wind Ensemble and soprano cornet of the ECU Brass Band.